All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Emily C. Thank you for having me. I'm a licensed acupuncturist, as Nellie said, in New York City. I'm second generation Chinese, and my practice and my business is in Chinatown. I'm saying this all because I feel like I've been experiencing the effects of COVID since January. In January, I saw a huge decline of tourism and business in Chinatown. And this was not due to a fear of COVID. I know this because I don't even think people really fear COVID right now today, or at least there's a large population of people who don't. In January, people didn't know what COVID was. A lot of people were like, oh, it's just the flu. Scientists didn't know what COVID was. People denied the severity of COVID really until the last second before we were shutting things down in March. So this was not a fear of COVID. It was a fear of Chinese people or anything Chinese. And just around Lunar New Year, that's a time normally when a lot of people from other communities want to come to Chinatown. Around this time was when I noticed how people really reacted towards me personally for wearing a mask on the subway. So I wear masks on the subway like during flu season normally. And in New York City, no one looks at you on the subway. No one looks twice at you. They don't care what you're wearing. They don't care what you're doing. But this was different. I do remember the first instance that someone kind of like treated me differently. I was walking on the street and I was wearing a mask, and maybe like 20 feet in front of me was another East Asian presenting woman, and she was also wearing a mask. And there was like a group of young white women passing us, and they just started giggling. And it was kind of like being laughed at for being the only Asian person in like an all-white high school. Um, Within a week of that happening, a Chinese woman was attacked in Chinatown for wearing a mask. And then a few days later, there was like a similar account. And at this time, people in the Asian community were actually saying like, we shouldn't wear masks. It's kind of dangerous. There were Facebook groups where people were posting news stories of anti-Asian violence. There were, personal accounts of people saying like, oh, I went to the drugstore, this happened to me. And, all these things that were happening in New York City. Yes, they were happening in the Bay Area. Yes, they were happening in almost every heavily East Asian populated city. So I know I started to feel certain ways about the whole mask kind of rhetoric when there started to be like, oh, there's a mask shortage. Oh, there's a mask mandate. And, I even like heard some of my friends being like, now we're supposed to wear masks. Like the government needs to really like distribute them to everyone. So I just feel like I will always feel a certain way about wearing masks now. And now it's just, you look in New York City, everyone's wearing them. So it's normal. So some of my, when I started talking about this kind of stuff early on, some of my non-Asian friends, they were kind of like in disbelief, or, they were just trying to be really sympathetic. And I even remember during lockdown, I had a conversation with my friend who's also East Asian. We were talking about what we should walk around on the street with if we had to go to the grocery store. Should we carry a bottle of water in case someone tries to throw acid on us? What kind of weapons should we be carrying? And it just like made us wanted to stay inside more. And I also think just like in parallel, a lot of my other friends were like, we're going jogging for exercise now. Not just to kind of like see the difference of experience. So I want to point out that anti-Asian violence is nothing new in the United States. During the gold rush, Chinese people came to the US in the late 1840s and 50s to do mining work. And it caused a lot of violence towards Chinese people because white colonizers felt that the jobs were being taken from them. And so then the government imposed a foreigner miners tax. And then in 1854, the Supreme Court ruled that Chinese people, as well as Black and Native people, were not allowed to testify in court. So this just made it virtually impossible for these communities to seek justice when there was violence against them. Just kind of comparing that to today in your own minds. And then came the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882, which blocked Chinese people from coming to the United States for 10 years. That was later extended, and it also made it impossible for them to become naturalized. So this was the first law of its kind, restricting immigration of a certain group of people. Many colonizers in America attributed their economic hardships to the presence of Chinese, who at this time only accounted for 0.002% of the population. The Chinese Exclusion Act also paved way for similar exclusionary acts that restricted Japanese people, Middle Easterners, Hindu, East Indian people to come into this country. Those are just a few examples. So Chinatowns are often thought of as a tourist site or a place where people can come to experience sort of like a different culture or buy cheap food or goods. But Chinatowns are actually communities that are born out of this anti-Chinese violence in the late 1800s. And today that violence against East Asian people as a whole just kind of continues, and the White House just encourages it. So what I want people to take away from this is not to feel guilty or, you know, be in disbelief or to feel sympathetic. You know, I think I see a lot of that even in my own community among East Asian people. What I want people to take away from this is to kind of, instead of like fearing people who are different from you, like maybe we can learn from them. Because what I think a lot about is I wonder how different COVID in New York City could have been if people didn't laugh at us, harass us, punch us in the face on the subway for wearing masks back in January, but instead just started wearing masks early on. I wonder how many lives could have been saved. I wonder how many days of shutdown we could have avoided. So these are just questions I guess I want people to ask themselves and to kind of consider when you see someone who's doing something different from you and you want to sort of judge them for it.